Thank you. Can you hear me? First, let's give Dewey and Wilma for that another hand for letting us use their yard.
Yeah! Charlie, I think I smell weed.
Dan Church, thank you. I want to thank Dick Sloop, the Democratic County Chairman, the Mayor of Wilkesboro, Mike Instor, Alexander Commissioner Harold Odom, Wilkesboro Commissioner J. Gary Johnson, North Wilkesboro Commissioner Robert Johnson, Ashe County Commissioner Richard Blackburn, and the former Attorney General of North Carolina, Rufus Edmondson. He's been traveling around with me today, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Rufus. Ladies and gentlemen, first, I want to tell us for this, I love these front porch rallies. And I started doing these in Pennsylvania because it got warm enough, you know. And I want you to know that every place, I went back and said, every place we had a front porch rally in a rural county, Hillary got at least 60% of the vote. So don't you guys... Look, I am very honored to be here today, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want you to know a few things. First of all, my daughter said the other day, and she's been campaigning hard, you know. She's been in North Carolina a lot, been to Indiana where they've been voting next. And she was up in Indiana, and they said, "Do you think your mother would be a better president than Dad was?" And she said, "Sure I do." So, you know, there's nothing in life more fun than making fun of a politician. And I got this and got it something terrible. And first time I sort of tried to brush it off, I said, "Well, did you ever see a family where the women didn't sleep together?" And then I had to be serious and said, "I agree with my daughter." So this time, she's the best qualified person to be president I've had a chance to support in a long time. And I'd be here for her if we'd never been married. And I want to tell you why. I think the people of North Carolina ought to vote for her, because this country is in quite a fix, as all of you know. The economy is in the tank with not enough jobs, incomes are flat, costs are exploding. The average family will spend $450 more for gasoline this year alone. If you drive further, you spend more. Food's up $250, $300 a year this year because of fuel prices. And that's on top of what's happened in this decade, where healthcare costs have doubled, college costs up 75%, the average family's energy costs up $2,000. And most people think they're already in a recession because incomes are flat. And if you look at why, it has a lot to do with the economic policies we've been living under. 90% of the economic gains in the last decade have gone to the top 10% of the earners. Over 40% of to the top 1%. And a big chunk of that from the top 1/10 of 1%. Now, if you compare that when I had the honor of serving, average family income after inflation across all racial groups and across this country went up $7,500 a year. This time, average family incomes after inflation are $1,000 lower than they were the day I left office. That's why people think they're already in recession. We had 22.7 million new jobs, 5 this time. We had almost 8 million people work their way from poverty into the middle class. That's the American dream. Welfare rolls dropped 60%. Now 5 million falling from the middle class into poverty, most of them while they were working. And I heard that this is a typical story out here. I did 7 stops in Oregon and 5 in Indiana last couple of days before coming here. And I got to my last stop in Indiana, there was a lady there, and I could see she was crying before I got to her, and I got up there and she had her disabled child in a wheelchair. The child obviously had some sort of hereditary brain problem. And she was crying, she said, "Look, my husband, for years, owned his own trucking business, and he went broke because of high fuel prices. Couldn't pass them on. So then he had to take a job as a contract trucker. But because my daughter, as you see, is very ill, we couldn't be put on the company's health care policy. So what are we supposed to do?" She said, "We got to eat, and the price of eating is putting our daughter's life at risk." She said, "The only thing I could do," she said, "I guess we could get divorced and live in sin, and I could get a government help." She said, "Where I come from, we don't do that kind of thing." That's the second family I met telling me that story. Just because of the way their kids work. Now look, this country only works when it looks kind of like this crowd does. Look around here. Here we are united by race, by age, by gender, by religion. We just all here because we want America to go forward together. This country works when there is shared prosperity, shared opportunities, and shared responsibilities. That is the first and most important responsibility of this next president. You've got to hire somebody who can get us going together again in the right direction. So here's my argument for Hillary. Number one, she's got the best and most aggressive plan to create 8 million new jobs in ways that cannot be outsourced. 5 million by repealing the subsidies that we never should have given to the oil and nuclear companies in the first place and putting it in to making America more energy independent through homegrown energy and energy efficiency. It will create jobs in every rural area as well as every urban area in America. 3 million through fixing our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our sewer systems, which will also save energy and create jobs. And none of these jobs can be outsourced. You've got to be where the work is to do it. And let me remind you something, folks. When I came here in '92, I told you I had a plan for 8 million jobs, and you wound up with 22.7 million. In my family, we don't own the promise. If you don't get more jobs, you can't raise wages. There's no demand for labor, there's no new jobs being created. So that's the first thing. We've got to have new jobs, and she's got the best plan to do that. Second, she's got the best plan to do something in the short and the long run about gas prices. And she got the only plan of anybody running that'll do something in the short and the long run. In the short run, we got to give people some relief. I mean, we got people actually going broke because they can't even buy food for the gas bills. They got to spend the gas money to get to work. Isn't that right? Yeah. When we got married, Hillary and I lived in the congressional district with the highest per capita gasoline usage in America because it was just as hilly as the mountains I've been driving to. And nobody had enough money to buy a new car. So I know something about this. But here's her plan. Short term. Release some of the oil from America's strategic petroleum reserve and put it to the refineries so you'll have more oil, the volume will go up, and the price will drop. That'll help. Now, let me just say something. Some of these other people will tell you that's not responsible. I ran that thing for 8 years. There's a reason we have a strategic petroleum reserve. If something happened and all the oil countries were attacked tomorrow, we could live a long time on that petroleum reserve. But it's full now. Oil companies put money in it, put oil in it every single month. We can afford to give enough oil to lower the price to get you through the summer months. Even if something totally unforeseen happens, we'll be all right. So that's a responsible thing. That's the first thing. Second thing she wants to do is to temporarily suspend the federal gas tax, which is 18.5 cents a gallon, to get you all the way through the summer, and let the oil companies replenish the money by a small fee on their excess profits. They're making more money than they know what to do with.
Yeah.
Now, that would probably together, it'd take the price of gasoline down somewhere between 30 and 40 cents a gallon through the summertime. That would really help people a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Right now, third thing she wants to do is to have the Federal Trade Commission investigate whether the oil companies have used the high prices of oil to charge even more than they're legally permitted to for gasoline. I think there's a chance that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the short term. Now, but here's the real deal. No matter how popular it might be, no one can come here running for president and promise you to lower the price of a barrel of oil again. Because there's a limited amount of oil in the ground, and more people around the world can afford to buy it. That's why the price is high. It's not as if just America and Europe and Japan can buy this oil. Lots of people with more money now, they're bidding it up. And they're using more and more and more. We got to figure out a way to travel on less. In cars and SUVs and trucks. Not just pickups, but commercial trucks on the highway, the whole 9 yards. We can produce more of our own fuel, biodiesel and biofuel, and we don't have to use corn crops to do it. That's the least efficient way. You can grow fuel in North Carolina in 3 ways. You can take the leavings of every farm crop or field grass. You can take the leavings of every timber cut, or you can just close every landfill in North Carolina and use the garbage in it. You can make biofuels out of all of it. It'll be yours, it'll be cheaper, it'll create jobs. And the great thing about it for rural North Carolina is this. If you make ethanol or biodiesel, you cannot put it in a pipeline. You got to tote it around by truck, which means you have to produce it every 150 miles or so. Now, you just think about how many rural places there are in this state that haven't had any new production jobs in 10 or 20 or 30 years. Why shouldn't we make it and not be dependent on other people who can charge us an arm and a leg? The other thing we can do is make more higher mileage cars available to you. A lot of people get mad at Detroit, but I got to defend the car industry here. It costs a fortune to retool these car plants. And what's happened in the past is we all want these high mileage cars when oil's high, and then the price will turn around and drop, the gasoline price will go down, people will quit buying them, and they'd be out all that money they spent. Now that's not going to happen again. I will be very surprised if oil ever goes below $100 a barrel in my lifetime. And most experts think it'll be $150 by the end of the year. So Hillary wants to have the federal government actually invest with these car companies that they will accelerate their production of cars in America to create more jobs in America to get higher mileage, and to spend some of the money that you want to put in this trust fund by repealing these subsidies to get you a really high mileage car. And I'll give you one example. She called me a couple months ago. She said, Bill, well, let me back up. I grew up in the car business. My dad and my uncle were in the Buick business in little town, Arkansas, where I was from, and when I was 5 or 6 years old, I was changing oil and under the car, and that's back when a real human being could repair a car. You can't do it anymore. But I mean, anyway, so she called me, she said, Bill, I just talked to a guy who swears to me he's driving a car that gets 100 miles a gallon. And I would really like to talk about it, but I don't want to be embarrassed. You call and find out if it's true. So I called this fellow. And he said, yeah, that's right. He said, there are 50 of us in America that are using the technology manufactured in Massachusetts. And I have gotten, for the last 14 months, 105 miles per gallon in town. He said, now, I only get 70 on the highway. So I said, well, you got anything on it? He said, yeah, I'll send it to you right now. So he faxed me the stuff, and I read the specs and talking. Here's what it is. Now, but this is just one example of what you could have if you had a president who wanted to give it to you. This car is basically a hybrid car on steroids. You know how these little hybrid cars work. And I got a hybrid SUV I drive when I'm home. They go to 25 miles an hour on a battery, right? Then when you get over there, it goes in the fuel, so you average about 40 in town, 30-something on the highway. This one gives you 40 more miles every day on the battery. Now, that means you don't switch the fuel until you get 40 miles a gallon. That means when you're driving around in town here, you're getting 100 miles per gallon. Now, think what that would do for your family's budget. Just think in your own mind. Think about what you're shelling out and how your life would change. And what more you could do for your kids and your family. Just think about it. Now think about what it would do for your country. We could say to all those nice folks, some of us all this oil, we didn't think about it, friends. Just go on and charge us $120 a bill. On second thought, charge us $200 a bill. Charge whatever you want, because we are now going to keep our $350 billion at home in our family's pocketbooks and our children's future, creating the jobs of tomorrow, strengthening our economy, and cleaning up the environment. We could make America whole again. Not only that, you think about all the jobs we create, you guys would come running to buy these cars, and then there would be millions of cars turned in, and there would be a whole new industry created in America thinking about some responsible way to recycle all that metal and do all that stuff. There'd be no end to the money we would make. And I'm just telling you, I go all around the world to work on this stuff. I do this work now, this energy work. In my foundation, the only country, the high-income countries like America, that are creating a whole lot of jobs and swelling the middle class and raising wages are those that are becoming more energy independent. One of the reasons Hillary won in Ohio was she was outspent 2-1. That swept every place that looks like this. Every place. was that Ohio has a plant that makes more solar panels than any single plant in America, and they're going to open another plant. Not in America or Mexico or China, in Germany, where it's way more expensive to operate. You know why? Because that country, with a fifth our land mass and less than a third our population, generates more of their electricity from the sun than we do. And the sun doesn't shine as much, but the government there subsidizes their own energy and their own jobs and their own future instead of yesterday's interest rate. And if we had a president that would do that in America, you could do exactly the same thing. We could make those jobs everywhere in this country. That's my first argument for her. If you don't get the job machine going, the rest of this is just listen Dixon. And you know it as well as I do. So you got to hire somebody as president who will do that. Now my second argument for her is that we got to do something about health care.
Yeah, we do.
Health care costs have doubled in the last 7 years. If they double in the next 7 years, I'm not talking about more money for medical research. I'm not talking about a solution to Alzheimer's or autism or all these problems that are bedeviling our people. I'm just saying, if you just keep paying that much more for the same old thing, you're going to have more people without health insurance, and you cannot bring the economy back. That's just as bad as somebody promising you they'll lower the price of oil. Anybody that comes here and tells you, we don't have to stop these medical costs from doubling every 7 years, and we can bring the economy back, is not being straight with you. We can't do it. You know, I'll give you just one example. The labor movement has always been for universal health care as a moral right. They figure their families have it, everybody else ought to have it. They did a press conference in Washington about 8 months ago. They had the president of Walmart with them, the largest non-union company in America. What was that guy doing up on the stage with the labor guys? Because he knows that you double your health care costs, you're not going to have 1 red cent to spend at Walmart in the next 10 years. I mean, this is not rocket science. Now, you have to decide how important this is to you. And then you have to decide whether you think the American Nurses Association was right when they endorsed Hillary because they said she had the only plan that would solve the problem. Whether Elizabeth Evans was right when she said Hillary's health care plan was better. You're just going to have to decide. But let's start with this. Raise your hand if you know somebody without any health insurance at all. Yeah, look at this. Now here's what you have to decide. Do you believe that there is a connection between the high cost of health care and the fact that you don't have it? And will you accept that we'll never get a hold of the cost until we cover everybody? Because, look, just like I told you about Germany, they're outbidding us for solar energy jobs, right? Every country we compete with, every single rich country, finds a way to cover everybody at a lower cost than we pay. Every one. We're the only country in the world that doesn't provide affordable health care to everybody that has an advanced economy. And it's all cheaper. If we borrowed any other country's health care system, rich countries, Germany, Japan, France, you name one, and you put it in here, everybody would be covered, your health outcomes would be better, and you would pay, listen to this, $700 billion a year less. That's the size of the trade deficit. That's how much you're paying for the system we've got. And I'll just give you 2 examples. This is really important. This is a big issue for working families in America. Every time you make a health insurance payment, you're contributing to the $50 billion the insurance companies spend every year figuring out how not to insure you. Think of it as your uninsurance premium.
Sure.
You've heard the story. I'm sorry, I'd like to give you a policy, but you've got a pre-existing condition. I'm sorry, you do have a policy. It just doesn't cover what you need right now, even though you thought it did when you bought it. I'm sorry, you've got a policy that covers what you need right now, but it is really expensive. So I went back and reviewed your application. You forgot line 3. We're canceling you. Now, all 3 of those things have happened to somebody in this audience. I know it. Now, if everybody were covered, it would be illegal to spend 1 red cent trying to get your medical records and now you covered. You save $50 billion right off the bat just by covering everybody. Second thing, 30 cents of every dollar you pay on health care is blown on paperwork.
Yeah.
Is there a business in this county that could stay in operation if they lose 30% of their revenues on overhead? Any kind of business? No. Why do they do that? because there's hundreds of companies with thousands of policies that all cover different things, and they spend all kinds of time trying to delay payment. You can't find a doctor that hadn't tripled his paperwork costs or her paperwork costs in the last 7 years. If we were all covered the way Hillary wants to cover us, and here's how she does it. You like what you got, you can keep it. If you don't like it, or you don't have it, or you can't afford it anymore, you can buy exactly the same plan that insures federal employees and members of Congress and our families. Because it's a really good plan, and you underwrite it anyway, so it's good enough for our family, you ought to have access to it. Now, and believe me, it's cheaper than almost anything you can get. Here's how it works. If you're young and single and healthy, all you got to do is buy enough to protect yourself against a car wreck or an unforeseen illness. If you got little children, you can get dental health coverage. Mental health issues in your family, you get really good mental health coverage. But no matter what you do, we'll all be in these huge insurance pools. So that will cut your administrative costs way, way down from 30 cents on the dollar. Medicare, just to give you a comparison, is 3 cents on the dollar. You know how much our paperwork is? That's $200 billion, and that's $700 billion is pure paperwork that you wouldn't pay if you had any other country too. So Hillary would take the savings from the paperwork and not being able to spend $50 billion cutting you off and give it to lower income working people and small businesses and family farms to make sure nobody would have to pay more than a certain low percentage of their income in health care. So everybody could afford it, but we all got to be covered or you can't get control of the cost. You just have to decide if you think the nurses are right to endorse it, and if you're tired of making excuses and you want to make progress. But I am telling you, unless we do this, we cannot bring the American economy back, and family after family after family will live in insecurity and misery, and no other country tolerates this. So if you're tired of making excuses and you want to make progress, you ought to vote for Hillary for president on the health care issue. The third reason you ought to vote for it is because of this home mortgage crisis. Now, you may not know anybody that's facing home foreclosure, but about 1 million of your fellow Americans are going to get thrown out of their houses this year. And most of them were making their mortgage payments until they were told that they had to raise the mortgage payment. While the values of the houses were going down, all these poor people with subprime mortgages are being told they got to pay more. There's all kinds of stuff floating around, but she is the only person who, first of all, begged the federal government to do something about this more than a year before the current government raised a finger. And she is the only person who said the cheapest way to do this is to protect the people in their homes and leave them there. Let's give the states some money, let them go in and cut deals with these mortgage companies to make sure that they split the lawsuit with them, and everybody who can make their payment and is told the truth should be able to stay in their house for 5 years at the same mortgage payment and shut this thing down now, because if we don't do it, it is going to have a colossally expensive effect on this economy. And that's another reason you ought to vote for her. You hire presidents to keep big bad things from happening so you can make money happen. The fourth reason you ought to vote for her is over education. Because she knows the most, she spent the most time in classrooms, and she's the only person that ever did anything to make college more affordable. She wants to get rid of No Child Left Behind. It's important for all of you who are not clapping to realize that these teachers and other people did not clap because they don't want to be competitive, because they're afraid of accountability. That's all a bunch of bull. This is a colossal failure. That's how it works. Look, you want your kids in this county to learn at world-class levels, don't you?
Yes.
You know they're in a world economy. You want them to learn science and math and technology, foreign languages. Of course you do. And I hope you know they can. We've actually got a world of brain studies now which prove beyond any question that almost 100% of America's young people, without regard to their family income, their race, or their first language, can learn whatever they need to know to do just fine in this global economy. And we know we're not. But the reason we're not is, the reason there's a gap between, let's say, what German kids or kids from Singapore know and what we know, has nothing to do with Leave No Child Behind. It's because they go to school longer every year. They start the hard courses earlier. They have national standards they've worked on for decades. And relative to other professions, they pay the educators more, they train them harder, and they retrain them for a lifetime. This is not rocket science. That's what costs us. You're not going to fix it by telling North Carolina to give the kids 5 tests 5 years in a row, we're going to give your district federal money based on how to do on this test. Look, there's not a state in America that cares more about education than North Carolina. There's not a state in America where you've got 1 in 8 of your adults involved in a community college every year. You ought to be proud of that. There's not a state in America that's got a better chancellor of the university system like my friend Ursula Bowles, who used to be my chief of staff, trying to get in there and get the university to help make the high schools better. You're doing the right things here. This is getting in the way. 80% of our schools have already cut back on history, on economics, on music, on the arts, and they have to give a test the kids can pass or they'll lose their federal money. So that's why you heard all this cheering. People are sick of teaching to a test that they know over time will lead our kids to learn less. Take this money and use it to place truly qualified young teachers in these subjects, because 2 million teachers are about to retire, to have smaller classes, and to give school districts the funds they need to actually implement what we know will produce world standards of excellence instead of this thing we got. And she would get rid of it. She's the only person who's promised to do this, and it's a big reason you ought to vote for it. So it will help. She also, as I said, is the only person who's done anything to make college more affordable. While she was running for president, she went back to Washington and passed a bill that will help, I'll bet you, the children and families in this audience. Every year now in America, we have thousands of young people dropping out of college because they think they cannot borrow $10,000 or $20,000 more. You know that, don't you? Because the cost is going way through the roof. They say, I know when I get out I'm not going to make much money. I cannot borrow anymore. I better quit, try to save some, maybe I'll go back someday. Folks, this is nuts. If a kid gets a college degree, it's worth way over $1 million to the young person and to the rest of us over a lifetime. So to drop out over $20,000 doesn't make any sense unless you just think you can't repay it. So Hillary passed a bill called the Student Borrower's Bill of Rights. Here's what it says. It says, don't you dare drop out because you're afraid to borrow more money. Because now, no matter how much you borrow or how little you make when you get out, you have an absolute right to pay that loan back as a low fixed percentage of your income over a longer period of time. That is a good investment in America. He also proposes to raise the tuition tax credit to $3,500 a year, raise those Pell Grants every year, and say to young people, crack down on the increases in the student loan companies. They're charging these kids 14, 16, 18%. You know, I was the first person in my family to go to college. Hillary went to college. We went to college. We were on our own, self-supporting. We got in law school. We were up our ears and dead. I had 6 jobs in law school. Never more than 3 at once. But you know, my government loaned us money at 2% interest. A lot of you old enough to remember that. Because we said, oh, we got to catch up to the Russians. They're ahead of us in education. You know what it says? A kid like me, Arkansas is the second worst state in the country. My stepfather was a high school dropout. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And even my mama didn't think I wanted to be a president. Your government looks at you and says, we believe in your future. We're going to let you borrow money from us too at 6% interest. I would have never been president. Shoot, I wouldn't have done anything. If somebody hadn't believed in me and given me a chance, I didn't have a nickel in my name. Why are the young people today worth less than that? Why do we tolerate them paying 18% interest on loans? Because we don't have a president that's looking out for them and their future, and it's going to change. Next reason you ought to vote for it, and the last one on the economics, is it's got the best position on taxes in this budget. And that's important for trade. I'll be real brief. First, she thinks people have been lucky like she and I have been and made a bunch of money. We ought to have our tax rates go back to where they were when I was president, so we can give tax cuts to middle class people who need to work. And you tell me how in the wide world we just went through a decade where 90% of the benefits went to the top 10% of the people, and we gave them 5 tax cuts while we had soldiers in the field in Afghanistan and Iraq and unmet needs at home. It's a disgrace. And let me tell you something. There were plenty of millionaires made when I was president, more than in this time. Nobody got hurt paying their fair share, and no American resents financial success. What they resent is unfairness. We're living in a time of unfairness, and she will say it right, and give the tax cuts to the families that need it. For health care, for education, for retirement savings, for caring for dependent relatives. One other thing. These candidates have both said some interesting things about how we need to improve our trade laws. And we do. But you ought to vote for Hillary on this issue because she's told you the whole truth, which is that it doesn't matter how you improve the trade laws. No agreement's worth a flip if you don't enforce it. You agree with that? Trade enforcement is 1/5 what it was when I was president. 1/5. And the reason is the deficit. They added $4 trillion to the debt. That's what the problem is. What's that got to do with trade? Well, think about it. Our big trade deficits are with China, Japan, Korea, and the oil sellers. So every day we have to borrow money to cover this deficit, right? We borrow it from China, Japan, Korea, and the oil sellers. You can't blame them for that. They didn't make us abandon the balanced budgets I left you with. We'd have been out of debt in 6 years entirely for the first time since the 1830s. And we wouldn't be worried about this. There would have been a single question in each presidential debate about Social Security if we hadn't just squandered this money. So now we got to borrow the money. Now do you see why we don't enforce the trade laws? Same reason you're not going to get up tomorrow morning and drive down to the bank and slap the living daylights out of the bank president. You might leave alone tomorrow afternoon. Now we're laughing about it, but it's serious. If you go to her website at HillaryClinton.com, you will see how every last dollar of these programs are paid for. And if you vote for her, even if she has to slow down some spending, she will take this country back to a balanced budget so the young people in this audience can have their future back. This is wrong what has been done. It is selfish to punish the ladies in an economic case. So, got the best jobs program, the best health care program, the best program for the mortgage crisis, the best education program, and the best program on the budget and taxes. That's why you ought to be for us. You can turn this country around. Second thing is you got to elect a commander-in-chief that can do it the right way. We need to bring our soldiers home from Iraq, rebuild the military. She's trying to take down the leaders of Al-Qaeda who are trying to kill us and take care of the veterans. And she's way the best to do that. You know, a couple of days ago, General Hugh Shelton, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, came here to North Carolina, where he grew up and where he commanded the Special Forces at Fort Bragg and endorsed Hillary for president, because he trusts her to end the war in Iraq in the right way, to take care of the veterans, and to take care of the men and women in the military. This is a very big deal. Anybody can get on a applause line saying they're going to end the war in Iraq. You've got to do it in a way that maintains the confidence in the military and sends the right message to the rest of the world that we are going to have diplomacy first and military as a last resort, not the other way around. We're going to cooperate with you first and act alone only when we have to. None of it works if the military is not credible. None of it works. And you know that is very likely. Why is she the best on this, and why did 2 former chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and 35 retired generals and admirals decide that the first serious woman candidate for president would be the best commander-in-chief? Why? Because first, she's on the Armed Services Committee. She represents the 10th Mountain Division out of New York. She has a stunning record of achievement for veterans and men and women in uniform, and she never passed a bill on this committee that she's got a Republican co-sponsor because she thinks that national security has to be a bipartisan concern for the American people. And this is a big deal. She and Senator Graham from North Carolina passed a bill to get body armor to our troops quicker, and a bill that guarantees that when members of the National Guard and Reserve from North Carolina serve, now when they came home, they get the same health care benefits regular military people do for life. That's a big deal. They've done a lot of other things. I won't bore you with all the details, but there's a reason all these people are for it, because they know she knows what she's doing. The Pentagon asked her to be on a small commission to study the future of the military. She was the only senator they asked, and the Republicans were still in the majority. That's how much confidence they had in her because of her service. And that matters. The other reason you ought to vote for her is she wanted me to say to you, we can save most but not all of that $120 billion you spend in Iraq, because we have got to make sure that we don't make the shameful mistake we made after Vietnam and confuse an unpopular war with our duty to the men and women who served in it. She'll take care of these veterans. You know, let me just tell you, folks, this is the last point I want to make, and this is a big deal. You know, she spent a lot of time at Walter Reed Hospital trying to clean that place up. Spent a lot of time trying to think about what the veterans need when they come home. We have 70,000 wounded veterans. Several thousand of them have traumatic brain injuries because they were too close to those roadside bombs, and their brains traveled around their skulls and interrupted their neural networks. But we'll get you out of here in just a second. You know, you're going to leave here, and you won't give a second thought about how you're going to get from here to where you're going. There are young Americans today that can't do that anymore. She met a young man in a hospital who was a West Point graduate and had his arm blown off below the elbow by one of these bombs. And he said, now, Senator, don't you worry about my body. My body's going to be fine. This prosthesis will work. I knew what I was doing when I signed up. I knew the risk, and I was honored to serve, and my body's in better shape than most people who've been wounded. But he said, what I want is for you to help me get my brain back. And she said, but I don't understand. We're having a good conversation here. He said, yes, ma'am, we are. He said, you stand right there. I can talk to you about military history till tomorrow morning. But he said, I can't go outside unless my wife writes down everything I have to do and directions about how to get back home. There are thousands of these kids like that. We met a guy in Texas who's been through 2 years of therapy. He got his whole brain back. All of his functions are working again. Some of them will get it back. But you need a presidency to stay with them all. That's what you need. And in Vietnam, we have 200,000 homeless veterans today. Almost all of them are Vietnam veterans. They have what we call now post-traumatic stress disorder. But they wouldn't be living under bridges and in cardboard boxes and being thrown out of rental houses if they had had what she wants to do now, which is to give every veteran coming home, first, she tests them all. She has to go test them all for traumatic brain injury. And second, guarantee them a veteran's bill of rights that includes counseling and mental health care and a veteran code to live in if they can't get out of the home. Not just education, but small business and health too. She'll take care of them, and it's a big reason to be part of the country. So, she's the best to be our commander-in-chief and restore our standing in the world. And finally, she's the best change maker I've ever known. That's why, you know, you got 65 to 85 people in Arkansas traveling around campaigning for her with a little brochure saying, you got to vote for this woman because look at the changes she made in our lives and Bill Clinton's government. These are the things that she did. You got farmers from the Republican counties in New York going all over America saying, you really ought to vote for this woman because she changed our lives. She's the only person we ever voted for that ever did anything for us instead of just talking. And in the end, folks, we need a doer. You know, I tell you what, there was a time when I could give a pretty good speech. But when I think back on the years I served as president, the lives that were changed, the people that had jobs, the kids that got college education, the family and medical leave law, the things that actually changed people's lives, that's the stuff I think about. Because in the end, what matters is not whether these two candidates are historic. They're both historic. What matters is the future we're going to make for the kids here. That's the only thing that matters. There's some people tell me you ought to go ahead and don't bother to vote or don't bother to vote for her. She can't win. You know, that's what they said in Texas when she was outspent by $4 million. She won anyway. That's what they said in Ohio. She was outspent 2 to 1. She won anyway. Then they said in Pennsylvania, there's no way she could survive this. They outspent her by $8 million on television. $8 million. And she won by 10 points anyway. She is a tough customer, but she's got to have your help to win anyway. And if you help her, she'll win anyway, and then America will win because she'll be a great president. Thank you.